When WWE opened their Performance Center in 2013, it was presented as this revolutionary idea. A central hub for wrestling, a place for training facilities, offices, scouting, production, conditioning, and matchmaking, all under one roof. And to be fair, for modern wrestling, it was revolutionary. But Britain had its own version of that over 50 years earlier, and it was in Brixton. Because long before WWE had the Performance Center, British Wrestling had Dale Martin Promotions. Hello everyone, I'm Josh Faulkner, the wrestling comedian. Before we get started, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Instagram at The Wrestling Comedian and over on TikTok at Wrestling Comedian. Now, if you know anything about British wrestling history, you'll know Dale Martin wasn't just another promotion. They were the promotion. Formed after World War II in 1948 by brothers Jack, Johnny and Billy Dale, alongside Les Martin, Dale Martin Promotions became the dominant force within joint promotions. And at their peak, they weren't running 1 or 2 shows a week. They were running entire circuits, sometimes as many as 4 or 5 shows a night. Different towns, different halls, different wrestlers, all operating simultaneously, which meant they needed something wrestling in Britain had never really seen before: a headquarters. A base of operations, and that base became the famous Dale Martin facility in Brixton, South London. Now, there's photos that still circulate online today showing all the ring vans lined up outside the building, and those photos tell you everything about the scale of the operation. This wasn't some little independent promotion running out of the back room of a pub. This was a machine. Inside those offices, matches were arranged, cans were covered, transport was coordinated, wrestlers were booked, and entire touring schedules were organised. You've got to remember that this was before mobile phones, before email, before the internet, yet somehow they managed to keep a nationwide wrestling operation moving almost every single night. And that's what made Dale Martin Promotions so powerful. It wasn't just the wrestlers, it was the infrastructure, and downstairs in the basement of that building was something even more interesting, because beneath the offices in Brixton was a gym. Not some polished state-of-the-art facility like the WWE Performance Center. There was no motivational slogans on the wall, no cryotherapy chambers, no branded protein shakes. This was an old-school wrestling gym, and it became known as a home for shooters. Now, in wrestling terminology, a shooter is somebody who can genuinely handle themselves. Legitimate grapplers, submission wrestlers, men who blurred the line between professional wrestling and real fighting, and British wrestling in that era was full of them. Because despite what modern fans sometimes think, British wrestling in the 60s and 70s was heavily rooted in catch wrestling traditions. A lot of these men could really wrestle, and the Dale Martin Gym became a place where wrestlers trained, conditioned themselves, stretched, grappled, and learned the craft properly. They learned not just how to perform, but how to survive, because the British wrestling circuit was brutal back then. Long drives, multiple towns, little sleep, working long matches almost every night. And if you couldn't go in the ring properly, people found out very quickly. Now, one of the most influential figures within Dale Martin Promotions was Mick McManus, and McManus wasn't just a top star. He held serious power behind the scenes. By many accounts, Mick McManus effectively held the pen in the London office. That meaning he had major influence over matchmaking and bookings, and that mattered. Because in British wrestling at the time, being in favour with the office could make your career, and being out of favour, that could make your life very difficult. McManus understood wrestling wasn't just about what happened in the ring. It was about presentation, promotion, positioning, building attractions, and Dale Martin became masters at that. Just look at the names that they promoted over the years. McManus himself, Jackie Pallo, Kendo Nagasaki, Billy Two Rivers, Johnny Saint, Rollerball Rocco, and of course, Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks as examples. Some of the biggest names in British wrestling history passed through that system, and because Dale Martin controlled so much of the southern end of joint promotions, they became the closest thing British wrestling had to a true wrestling headquarters. In many ways, the Brixton facility was decades ahead of its time. Not in appearance, not in luxury, but in concept. A central location where wrestling business was organised, talent was developed, transport operated from, and the industry effectively revolved around. That's incredibly modern when you think about it. The difference is, WWE turned it into a corporate sports campus. Dale Martin did it with ring vans, cigarette smoke, old school grapplers, and probably somebody shouting about being late to Croydon. And maybe that's why people still romanticize that era, because it felt real. The wrestlers looked real, the offices felt real, the gyms were real, nothing about it looked manufactured. Yes, it was rough around the edges, but it produced generations of talent that kept British wrestling alive for decades. And without places like that Brixton headquarters, British wrestling as we know it probably doesn't exist in the same way. Because before the WWE Performance Centre, Britain had Dale Martin, and honestly, it was tougher. If you've enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments what's your favourite piece of old school British wrestling history. And if you want more content like this, you know what to do. And remember, I'll see you on the next one.